Welcome to martialartsnow.com. I am Pedro Bennett, the founder of martialartsnow.com, and we have a special guest for you today from Philadelphia. We have Grandmaster Nimr Hassan. Grandmaster, welcome.
Welcome, Pedro. Glad to be here this afternoon with you.
Well, I'm glad you allowed me martialartsnow.com to interview you. We just have a few questions we'd like to ask you, and we just also want to thank you for contributing to the martial arts as you have for many years. But before we get started, if you would, please briefly talk about your training experience.
Well, I guess my training actually started here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in 1957. That's always my jump off date. I was 10 years old, and I was at a family event, and I started off being disobedient. I was told to stay in a room, and I started running down the hall, and my aunt saw me and told me that I shouldn't be going, and I tried to play and tried to get by her. Next thing I know, I was going in the opposite direction in a slow roll. So I jumped up and I asked her if she could do that again. And I tried again, and the same thing happened. And I asked her what she had done, and she told me that she had used judo on me. Well, it was like magic. I mean, to go one way and then without knowing being someplace else. So I asked her to teach me. My aunt had studied with her brother, who was an Air Force colonel, judo, because that was what was popular in the service back in the 1950s and 40s and things of that nature. So I actually started with judo, and I would train. I trained with my aunt privately, and then I also practiced my skills out in the streets of Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, at my junior high school, which was inundated with a lot of gangs, and I found that the system actually worked. And I took up boxing, and I took up other martial arts when I was in the Marine Corps. I studied over in Japan and over in Okinawa. Then came back here to the States, studied with some great Aikido masters back here in the States. Went on fighting mostly. I don't want to use anything that had no street value, couldn't be used. And went on and trained and finally ended up in California and started off training with a guy named Moore there in California. And then I went to train with the great Grandmaster James Mitose. And that pretty much covers it.
Right. You are most noted for having trained with the great Grandmaster Mitose. If you would please share your experience with James Mitose. What did you learn from the great Grandmaster? Tell us about the experience.
The experience is very unique. I learned everything that I thought I knew, and I found out that I didn't know. Beginning to go to train with him, I was told I'd have to. So I went and knocked on his door, and his wife came to the door. And I told her who I was and who had sent me, and I was here. And she told me to wait a minute and shut the door and went back in the house. She came back, he said, come back tomorrow morning. So I left. I came back the next morning. She came to the door. She said, wait a minute. She went back in. Then he came to the door. And when I first saw him, I wasn't really impressed. He was kind of short. I'm 6 foot, 195 pounds. I'm not impressed with his size, or he just didn't impress me. And he says, okay, come back tomorrow morning at sunrise. The next day I came back at sunrise. He said, you made it. And from that point on, he took me in. First place I went, we got off the porch, went around to the side of the house, I went into his backyard, which was to become my training area. The first thing he wanted to do, he said, okay, he had a makawari up on this tree. He said, I want you to hit this makawari. So, you always want to show off. You want to do great things. You want to impress. So I took back. I threw a Oizuki, a straight punch, and I hit this makawari. And when I hit it, it went thump. There was nothing. There was a piece of some kind of cloth over a bare piece of wood. Well, when I hit the thing, it made a sound, that thunk sound. He told me I had to hit this wood 10 times and make the same sound each time. And then he said, when you finish that, do it with the other hand. That was my first. Well, it worked. I did it. I'm not going to say my hands didn't hurt. I thought, my God, this is going to be rougher than I thought. So, I did that. Then he started taking me in. I think some of the experiences that you get is how he taught, since our system has no katas. We're not a system with katas. We're a system that has a large repository of katas that we use for training. But we didn't have any katas. There's one kata that we have, and he said, I'm going to show you this kata. So I was standing on the front porch. He comes out the door. He does this kata, bang, 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 bang. I said, okay. He says, practice, and goes back in and shuts the door. So, you try to do what you remember. He comes back out. He says, show me what you remember. I showed him. He just shook his head. Showed me again, went back in, boom, shut the door. So that was some of the experience. So finally I got the kata. But what he was teaching me was, he said, you have to learn to be more observant of what other people do. If you're going to do this system, you have to observe what other people do. And from that point on, what we would do is we would go around to various schools. He would come in and he would have me stand there with him and would watch these schools go through their routines. And at the end, he would ask me, well, what did you think of that? And I said, oh, man. I said, that was great. I said, did you see the moves? And he would look at me and say, He said, no, it wasn't. He said, first of all, if a master or a teacher has to use that many moves to take somebody down, they probably need to recheck their system. He said, and the other thing, he said, the one thing is that they were too violent. He said, there were too many moves, and he said, you don't have to do that. He said, you do not have to be injured or hurt to learn how to do self-defense. He said that was just too much. And you don't have to use extravagant or killer moves to do self-defense. So that was how he taught. The one thing he taught that I always found very interesting was balance. With us, the balance, the foundations are most important. And the thing is, he would have me train like we would go down to the beach, but we go down to where the rocks are. And, late at night, and the rocks were slippery. So I had to practice my various patterns down on the rocks. And then he'd take me to the sand. He'd make me train in water up to my ankles. And then something, when I got really good, he'd make me train up to my shin, just below my knees, for strength and balance. Learning how to breathe. I thought I knew how to breathe until I started training with him. He taught me how to breathe, taught me how to see. You really think you see, he said, but how you see in a crisis and how you establish your vision is important. Those were the things that became paramount in the teaching. And our approach to striking, the whole thing was absolutely foreign. Had never seen anything like it. Had never even talked to anybody else who had seen anything like it. The thing that he explained to me is that what I was learning was the family system, which is different than what you teach in public. Because at that time I became the person that protected he and his family. So he said he taught me the best that he had, and this system was it. So I think that's about some of the experiences that I had.
Right. I remember back in the 90s coming to Philadelphia to train with you, and on the very first day, you had me to do a drill. It was a coordination drill, and even though I had ranking in other systems, black belts, I found it quite challenging to do the hand-eye foot combination. And I sort of laugh at it because I thought it was pretty good as far as sparring and fighting and moving and things like that. But I agree. Sometimes, we have habits and don't even realize the habits that we have. We call those sotomas. We always have those things. But one thing I want to ask is that I think a lot of times people, they don't know that you did have ranking in other systems. If not mistaken, you were a fourth dan.
Yes, when I came to it.
When you approach or you start training with Grandmaster Mitose.
Actually, that was a problem. Because when I went there, he said, well, what was your rank? I said, well, I'm a fourth dan. He said, you got to be a Godan, have to be fifth dan and better. I said, he said, don't worry, I'll make you a Godan. He said, if you came this far and you pass, you'll be a Godan by the time you finish. So he made an exception for me. I was very happy that he did.
Right. And what system were you a fourth dan in?
I was in just straight karate, just a Shotokan karate.
Shotokan karate. Okay, thanks very much. If you would elaborate about actual time and flex time, and also, please, you mentioned you trained with James Mitose. But how many hours a week did you train with James Mitose?
Well, we talk about flex time and actual time. When I first went there, he asked me, he says, okay, how long have you been training? And I gave him, what everybody, I've been training ever since, since I'm in 57, and I've been training 15, 20 years. And then he looked at me and said, well, how much actual time have you put in? And I didn't understand the question. Then he says, how much actual time did you put in? He said, a lot of people will come to systems and they will join the system, and they may come 3 times a week, and they get an hour each week, and then a week they'll miss a couple of weeks, and then they'll come in and they'll do a whole 3 months, and then they'll miss some time. But if you ask them how long they've trained, they'll give you the date they started and the date that is current. But in actuality, they never have trained that complete time. He said to know and to reduce expectations on both yourself and the teacher. He said you must do actual time. If the person was there for an hour, then that's all the time they had to train with the teacher. Outside of that, that's preparation to come back to do it. But he only counted the time that you were in front of him, which he called actual time, not flex time. And it's not new. It's not a new concept. People use flex time when you ask them, so I see you graduated from college. How long did it take you? They'll tell you, it took me 4 years. That's flex time. The actual time is that it took you 125 hours. I think that's how many hours you have to do to get your bachelor's. So you actually only have 125 hours of actual college time, you see, as opposed to say you did 4 years. And it makes it less of a problem on the student. If the student thinks that they've been training in the system for 6 months, but actually they've only come a total of 18 hours, well, it's easier to explain their development and their expectations of what they have and what they've done by saying, listen, you've actually only put 18 hours into it, as opposed to saying you put 6 months into it. So it reduces expectation both on the teacher and on the student. And it keeps a sense of real time in what's going on.
Right. And I think that's a unique approach in doing so. But in general, if you would give a guess, approximately how many hours a week did you train with?
All right. Well, we can add them up now. I started at sunrise. My first class was from sunrise till 8 o'clock. By that time, we had opened up a school in California. So from 8 o'clock, the next time I started training was at 10 o'clock. From 10 to 2 were morning classes at the school. Then I took a break. Then he would come over in the evening and train at the school from 6 to 8:30. So this went on 7 days a week. There is no off time. 7 days a week, that was primarily my schedule. So if we just take the minimum of me practicing 3 hours in the morning, you know, during any 7-day period. You see, that would equate to something like, what, 21 hours.
Right, I see. You know, when training with you, traveling down the train, I know even just you know, the running and the conditioning of your hands and the breathing, etc., was a pretty much challenge. And I could tell you probably after, you know, about an hour, hour and a half of training, you know, you pretty exhausted. You don't want to do another 2 hours of training. So I'm pretty sure it sort of helped you to get in shape, both mentally and physically, in a short period of time.
Well, it's learning how to use the air. It's not so much of just doing something, but it's learning how to utilize it to help you when you are tired. Where to breathe from. You know, he taught me how to breathe. He taught me how to develop my horror. He taught me how to connect. In the morning, it was not so much, people think it's all running and pounding. In the morning, he taught me how to do the morning exercise, which allows you to connect with the energy that's around. He taught me how to gather energy. Like he said, there are only 2 points on the body that you can take in energy. One are in the palms of the hand, and the other ones are at the bottom of your feet. And he says, you're like a tree. When you stand outside in the morning and you're facing east, and you're barefooted and you're there, your feet are hooked to the ground like the roots of the tree. And when you open your hands in our various signs, you're like branches on a tree. Everybody gets energy from the sun, no matter what. There's energy around everywhere, he explained to me. And he taught me how to hook into getting that particular energy. And that was more illuminating to me than anything, was that I had this change of sense of being connected to the whole. And he taught me that. He taught me that. And that was what our morning was primarily about. Other classes, when you talk about the actual using the system, which is different than anything else, our systems are different. It's based on mathematics. We do not use certain language in our particular system. As he taught it to me, he said, "Listen, certain things you can't use, certain languages you can't use." And once he taught me that, it made it easier to talk to everyone. What happens is the system can talk to anyone. You don't have to be any special training to learn the system. If you know that 1 and 1 equals 11, then you're all right now. If you know that, if you can do 1s and 2s and 3s and things of that nature, and if you know basic math, and we can teach you the rest of it, you can talk to anyone. This system, as he explained it to me, is based on 2 things: a 180 and a 360. With those 2 geometrical forms, we can teach you everything you need to know about self-defense.
I mean, really, thank you for that. And
I'm sorry.
No. Thank you for that enlightenment. Quick question as it relates to James Mitose and Ed Parker. From your knowledge, what was Grandmaster Mitose's experience with Grandmaster Ed Parker?
Well, he only told me about one experience, and I think that may have been part of the reason that he wanted me, because he said that he heard that one of his teachers or friends from Hawaii had a class. He went up there to go, and he did a move. He did a move where he went down to what we call the low position. The guy attacked. He dropped down. And he hit the guy in the top of the foot and hopped away. And he said that the teacher there, I guess it must have been Mr. Parker, told his students that wasn't a reality, and that that wasn't something that should be used on the street. And he embarrassed him. And Mitose was very upset about that. He thought that that move, which is a move that's done when you're about a sundown, was a common move that was done in Hawaii all the time. A lot of people knew that move. So when he demonstrated it, he was not expecting to be embarrassed or humiliated by a younger teacher that his teacher, people that he had trained with, his students had trained, would come and say that to him. And so he became very upset about that slight,
Right.
I
mean, that's really unfortunate that, that did occur, that which there would have been some better communication, but sometimes, I mean, in the martial arts, this is what happens sometimes. In fact, speaking of that, I often notice that people debate the difference between Kempo and Kempo, the N versus the M, and there's tons of thread after thread after thread after thread after thread. What was Grandmaster Mitose's view about the N versus the M?
Well, I think the example of that would be in the first book that he wrote. What is Kempo? What is self-defense and Kempo? When people look at the book, they see that on the front page is spelled Kenpo. He was highly upset about this. He said this was an error by the printer, but he wanted the book to go out. He let it go. And he said, and he showed me in the book, he said, here, let me show you something. So he opened the book, and on there are pages and Roman numeral pages with support letters for the project and for his school. And in those support letters, these are from the Hawaiian Police Department, the Hawaiian clubs over there, the district attorney's office, all these particular offices, they sent support letters for a project that he was doing. And in each of them, he showed me how they spelled the name of his system, and it was spelled Kempo. He said he kept the M in it because it showed the connection between China and Japan and the merging of the systems to make the Kogaha Koshiru Kempo systems. It showed the joining of the Sholen Changfa that came in from China and the Jujitsu that was mastered by the original Mitose in Japan. When they mixed to form the Kogaha, he said it was imperative that we keep the M to show the relationship between the two founding systems that occurred. And he also said it would be a way to separate from the new American Kempo that was really taking a hold and blooming here in the mainland. So he was emphatic about that M. And if anybody reads his original book and you go to the Roman numeral pages, you go down there and see the support letters. You'll see how they each spell the Kempo. That's
a very good point to point out, to go back in 47 or whatever year was published, and also look at Jujitsu or spelling and things like that. If one's going to be want to be historically correct, that's one method, or instead of I guess debating about it, just go to the source and see and see what's there.
Right.
You did talk about your system, but I just had a thought. What was your association with William Chow? From my understanding, William Chow acknowledged you as well as being a contributor to the system. What happened?
My association with the great Grandmaster Chow was very limited, more correspondence than anything else. There was a friend of mine who went over to see the Grandmaster, and I sent, of course, always greetings and pleasantries to him. And he had followed what had occurred here in the United States. He had followed my training, and he sent back a certificate recognizing me as a Shichidan, as a 7th degree, because of having kept the Kempo system pure, kept it in its original form and everything. He said he wanted to add his support to let him know that this is what I was doing. It was one of a very unexpected type of recognition that I got was from the late great Grandmaster William K.S. Thunderbolt Chow some years ago.
Well, that's some good information to add, because I'm sure a lot of people wasn't aware of that. But tell me, what is so special about your system? What is unique about your system?
Well, I think a few things. One thing is that it's how we look. We have non-judgmental language when we teach, because we don't want certain things to get in the way of your training, of learning self-defense. And we're teaching self-defense. We're not primarily teaching martial art. And there's where people get confused. They see martial art movement, but they have to understand those are our training devices. I'm sorry,
Yeah. Okay.
is there, maybe I can go further. Tell me again.
No. So what makes your system?
I think our language.
Explain the language.
Our
Okay.
language, the language that you use to get people to learn, is always important. And the language that I was taught was made so that anybody could learn. Like I said, we don't use things like left and right. We've taken those terms and turned them into numerical equations, where we'll go 2 and 3. Everybody can know 2 and 3, but a lot of people don't know their left and right unless they got a ring on their finger or they got a bad ankle or something. So here, this reduces the time that we can communicate with them. We talk about we talk about anatomy and physiology. We talk in medical and scientific terms where anybody can understand. Everybody knows where their heart is, and we call that a constructive center. Everyone knows where their fingers are. We call those the fort. So we have a language that is specific for this particular training, as that Mitose said, and he made me promise to keep it exactly how it was taught. So we use, like I said, mathematical, geometrical, medical, and scientific terminology in our teaching, and that's it. We don't deal with, try to get in the side where we have to deal with the ego and winning and those things that are paramount in a lot of systems. It's not about winning with us, it's about surviving, and there's a difference between winning and surviving. One is motivated by the ego, and the other one is motivated by necessity. And when you separate them and don't allow egotistical motivating words to be in your system, the person learns how to do self-defense a lot quicker. Once you reduce that baggage, learning is a lot quicker.
Right. I think to me, the way I interpret it is you're teaching a universal language, like, say, for instance, Latin and Greek, and you're able to piece it off to various language. And I think as a professor, college professor, this is what I found to be very, have worked to my advantage, is the fact that if I could find a common language within my classroom, my students are able to extract more from what I had to present. So that's a good method of doing it. And as it relates to, I know you said martial arts, Bob, but as it relates to martial arts and or martial science, what could we do to reduce violence?
Well, I think the one thing that any person can do to try to reduce violence is begin to learn how to communicate, how to talk, how to understand that everybody is not violent, and everybody doesn't. There are more people who seek to live a peaceful life. Everybody's trying to get peace. There are more people that want to live a peaceful life than there are people that want to be violent. But what we're seeing, and that is being portrayed, is that, as they say, the only way for you to seem to get peace is to be violent. Which is a cockeyed way of looking at things, but it seems to work a lot in the society. The person that'll punch you in the mouth is the person that you're going to give a breath and walk away from. But the person who may speak to you is the person you may run up on and try to say something. So it's a strange thing. But the way I think that you get people to get peace is for people to begin to communicate and not dialogue. People get dialoguing and communications confused, like people get punishment and discipline confused. So, if you want to learn how to make peace, talk to somebody, say hello to them. You may know you may find a common grounds of things.
Right. Earlier you had mentioned something about the ego. In one of my interviews with Shihan Roseberry, he pretty much mentioned the same thing as well as it relates to the ego. And sometimes the ego gets in the way, and when the ego gets in the way, it suppresses communication. So I think that's one area what I think we really need to focus on. And in reference to ego, we all have an ego.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's part of what makes us up. We all bias, and that's part of who we are. In fact, you sort of talked about, in a way, duality. And in talking about duality, you're going to have the opposite end of the pole. You're going to have a pose. So that's important. But what I find is that depending on the situation, you got to know what side of the fence you are, what side of the pole you are. Because I think the mistake that we make sometimes is we address each situation differently. Like I say, there's a difference between an issue and a problem. Now, if we have an issue, there's an assumption that we are going to resolve it. The problem is where we have to put work at it. But the thing is that we don't have the right strategy as we're addressing the problem. Not only do we compile the problem. So understanding duality and knowing that ego is an issue really is part of it. But now, what are your thoughts about the increase in combative systems? There's been a huge amount of combative systems, a lot. Sometimes I even found that the traditional martial artists versus the combative martial artists versus this martial artist versus that martial artist, or system or style. So just in general, what is your thoughts about the increase in combative systems of self-defense?
Well, I think it's like any other thing that happens in society. There are things that are trends and there are things that are fads. Things that are trends have been around for a long time. Your established martial arts, your from the various countries have been around for a long time. Your fads are the things that people get hyped up about and is a flavor of the month right now. I think that the actual consumption of large amounts of violence will eventually reach a point where the society will realize that it doesn't want it anymore, that it's just not illustrating or leading to anything that will help us grow. I think that it will run a course, as all of these fads have a tendency to do. Anytime that we begin to believe that we get our enjoyment out of seeing another human beaten until unconsciousness, then perhaps we have lost the real meaning of what it means to be human. And that's how I look at it.
I understand that, and it's something that we really got to look at, because as you were speaking, I was thinking about what's going on with ISIS and some of the things that's going on in Russia, et cetera, but it may extend from several factors as it relates to capitalism, as it relates to economics, et cetera, and things like that. But when we use violence, as a means to get our message across, sometimes, apparently, maybe to some, that's the only, I guess, option that they do have. But I think what we got to understand is that we're hurting other individuals as we're doing so. So in the martial science, martial arts, or whatever we're teaching, I think that's one important thing that we got to keep in mind as we're teaching. We got to teach the other half of it is peace as well, and nonviolence as well too. So I think that's.
May I just say something?
Sure, please. No problem.
When I speak of violence, because our area of research and expertise for decades or so have been around violence among our youth, and mine has been around violence among African American youth, mainly boys. And what we are trying to do is that we are trying to work on reducing that. Now, what is a part that people don't see, which has been hyped up and blown out of proportion, is that in actuality, when you study numbers, only 15% of the total juvenile population causes 67% of the violence. So what we are doing, we are taking 100% of our time and effort and focusing only on 15% of the problem. And what we are doing is that we're losing other children who are doing well, who are going to the Y's, the Jack and Jill's, the Boys and Girls Club, going to their churches, going to their mosques, going to their synagogues, trying to do well in school, doing after school sports, helping in their communities. There are hundreds and percentages of children who are out there doing that. But we have begun to focus on this small percentage to such a degree that if we want to keep it, we need to continue to support those other children that are living the kind of lives that their parents want, that their children want, that the community needs. And I think that may be one issue that we need to look at, is how we look at the population that is causing the difficulty and how we look at the population that is not.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was reflecting, and in the back of my mind, there's a couple of things came in mind. One is that, we talk about addressing violence at a middle school, high school, or 11, 10, 8-year-old at that time. And then I'm comparing a problem and an issue. I was reading, doing some studying, and in the study it was talking about how at age of 6 to 2, how it's very important that the caretaker spend time with their child, because it helps to develop cognitive learning, as well as it helps to improve the emotional intelligence. And some of the research is showing that those parents who did not spend the time in touching and talking with their kids at the age of 6 months up to 2 years old, there has been some emotional issues. And I think a combination of working with parents, particularly when kids are at that age, as well as the ones who are in which you're working with, I think will be very, very beneficial in resolving. Because if they're at the young age, it's an issue. It's an issue with something that could be resolved. But it's, I hate to say, but a lot of times when they get to older age, it becomes a problem whereby it becomes really challenging to resolve. But I want to applaud you and your organization for working so diligently in trying to resolve some of the problems that we're having. You worked on some project relating to violence. What other projects are you working on at this time?
Well, as you said, we had worked on some projects. We were very we had some joint efforts between some medical universities, Philadelphia School District, and some Ivy League universities. Here we started working with the Thomas Jefferson Medical College, and we had partnered with them through two of their doctors, Dr. Zivin and Dr. DePaula, out of their Department of Human Behavior, and they came and were able to work with us and provide us a lot of researchers as we tried to determine if we could have an impact and reduce violence on youth at risk for violence. And Dr. DePaula and Dr. Zivin brought in a staff, and we worked with a junior high school here named Wagner with young men who went through an actual research. In fact, we were published in a peer review called Adolescence. And that was one. And we've taught in high school and elementary schools. We tried to get them after middle school and before middle school. We taught here at the Martin Luther King High, and then we taught also at Wilson Elementary in Southwest Philadelphia. But we also were later brought onto a research, and we were very happy about this, that our research was recognized by the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, then under Dr. Howard Stevenson, who was dealing with a program of youth violence, especially males. But his program was a little different than the one I had come from. In ours, we had a quantitative review of a specific group. In his, we were more spread out because we knew that the dysfunction, if we were going to address the dysfunction in the family, we had to have the parents also. So his program was very inclusive. We had the children and the parents involved in the course. There was a book written called Playing with Anger. So we I've talked, we spoke, we brought our research and our results, which had proven that we can reduce violence in children if we teach them certain skills. We're not teaching them martial skills. We're teaching them self-defense skills. And in doing so, the results are fascinating. My point of view is because I like to know how long it worked, It was the follow-up that I found weak in our research, that we couldn't follow the children but for 2 years. We wanted to follow them at least 5 years after getting out of junior high school. But because of, research and money, we couldn't get the extensions to follow them the extra 3 years. But those children did well. I mean, you can look, there was an article in a yoga journal about this research, and we've been down to a few different conferences of psychologists and psychiatrists. We were up at Columbia University's Teachers College to do presentations to human service and social science professionals, and using these techniques to deal with violence with youth.
Grandmaster, I mean, I really want to thank you for working with the youth, and I think you're doing a very fine job. And we're coming to a close, but before we come to a close, I want to know, do you have any last words? But I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned martial arts as well as self-defense. Okay, I know you mentioned it early in your conversation, but for the audience may not be clear. Would you clarify the difference between the martial arts and self-defense?
Okay, I always tell people there are some commonalities between martial arts and self-defense. One of the commonalities that we all have, no matter what we do, is the ability to control through pain. That's what both of us do. That's how we can do that. The difference becomes is that we look at the philosophical differences between what we are trying to obtain. When a person goes into martial art, by being martial, you're talking about a warlike, either law enforcement or military type of approach to situations and scenarios. Being blunt, if you are a martial artist, you are in between two bookends. One is that to become a good martial artist, you must learn to do one thing, is to kill effectively and efficiently and reduce your enemy's chances. At the other end, you're taught that you must learn to die with honor. Well, we're not trying to develop martial art personnel. We're trying to develop citizens who can protect themselves. So we're trying to teach them ways of how to be able to defend themselves in society where the privilege of self-defense is given. And people are confused about the difference between the right and the privilege of self-defense. Self-defense is a privilege under the umbrella of the law in the state in which you live. As a civilian, you need to know what are the parameters and what you can do in any situation. If you are not military, if you are not law enforcement, then the community has not given you any special dispensation to do anything where you put your hands, restrain, or anything on another citizen. But if you are attacked, you need to know what you must do first. And there are books that tell you, as a trained fighter, as a martial artist, what you should do, what the law in the martial art. You need to read those things, especially if you go into schools. You need to know that if you come out and you use some of these techniques that you've learned in martial training, and it results in injury, maiming, or murder, you're going to be tried for those particular things. And you will say, well, it was self-defense. You better be sure that your actions were based on the law in the state in which you live concerning self-defense.
Okay. I really thank you for that clarification. It's very, very clear now. I'm Pedro Bennett from martialartsnow.com, and I'm here with Grandmaster Nimr Hassan, and I hope that you enjoyed our conversation, and we have more to come. So, Grandmaster, do you have any last words before we bring this to a close?
Well, I want to thank you, Pedro, for taking the time and considering our system. You have been a wonderful teacher and student and a friend to us, and we're very admiring the work that you're doing. And I think bringing different types of theories and mindsets and approaches to the martial art community is what they need, so that they can have a buffet of information by which they can grab from and do what's going to be best for themselves and for their families and for their loved ones. So when all I can say is when they decide to learn a martial art, study it, make sure it's going to give you what you want. Don't take it because somebody else took it. And be sure that you're going to be happy and that they're not teaching you anything that's going to get you locked up.
Right. Sir, if someone wants to get in contact with you, what would be the best route to contact you? Would you say go to martialartsnow.com or go to your webpage, or what would you suggest to contact you?
They can use you as a catalyst. They can go through you through martialarts.com, or they can go to our web. We have a web page called kogahakempo.com. They can go there and they can reach us. There's a phone number that they can call, 215-360-8116. And they'll be able to get through to, perhaps sometimes they'll be able to get through to me.
Right. I think Grandmaster has a wealth of knowledge, and if you haven't been in contact with him, I would suggest feel free to contact him. Again, this is Pedro Bennett from martialartsnow.com, and thank you.